Hello and welcome to a demonstration of how to install LoadRunner Enterprise version 2023 revision 1. We at SQALogic have been installing LoadRunner Enterprise and other OpenText software for many years, so I will do this installation the way that we've developed over the years. Our own little method there is set so you save a little bit of time, a little bit less headaches. It's not exactly as the manual states, but if you follow the manual as you shouldn't find yourself completely out of place by watching this video. So let me start by saying I will begin my installation with the load generator, followed by the host, and then finally with the server. And I like to do that in that order because when you're done with the installation of the server, you can go straight ahead to adding your hosts, your LGs, and start doing your health check right away without having to stop after you've done your installation of the server. Start installing those parts, going back to the server, and then adding that and check if everything went well. In my opinion, it's a little bit more streamlined. I'm also going to be adding service accounts right off the bat. I'll explain as we're going along why, but usually you don't really have to do that. But the long story short is that there's a service account, a user account, if you will. It's going to be generic, that can be created by LoadRunner during the installation process. That account comes with default credentials and so on and so forth. And I find it's more secure and simpler for me to create that account right away, configure it the way it needs to be configured, even on servers that for the time being don't really need it, because I often use some of these machines as a template for copies that I'll be doing later. All right, so let's begin with the video. Now, whenever you're doing the installation, and by the way, I'm starting with the load generator, right? I'm on my load generator machine. The IP address is 172.31.122. I'm just saying that. You don't have to remember it. But when I start the installation, I go to the 1LG option after I clicked on the setup, and I run it as administrator. It's very important that you run these tools as administrator. Every time you run the setup, run it as admin. Now, your account that you're using for the installation needs to be admin. In other words, when you're logging into Windows on your server, your account needs to be administrator. But you also want to run that application as administrator nonetheless. And the reason is simple. When you're running as administrator, there are extra privileges that a normal administrator account won't have. So that is a step that's recommended in the manual. And it helps you alleviate potential conflict issues in your system, especially with older versions of LoadRunner Enterprise if you're installing these. So now you probably already noticed this is taking a little bit of time. I've already clicked on 1LG. This is a very good machine. It's not bad. It has 4 CPU cores, 16 gigs of RAM. And all it's trying to do is install the 1LG application, which is the application used for the load generator. And it's been a little while that the machine is crunching down things, right? And that's normal. Normally, I wanted to show you in real time how much time you can expect for these delays to happen. But it would take, it would make this whole video a lot longer. So I'm going to time compress, fast forward, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go a little bit ahead of time, and now the installation should continue. There we go. So now you would need to choose the place where you want the software to be installed on that particular machine. I'm just using the default values. A lot of companies like to install everything on a separate drive for whatever reason. That's fine. It's company policy. But this is just a demonstration, so I'm not really caring about that. Now, you'll notice that there are a couple of things that the software installation is taking care of, such as the redistribution packages for C++ and all that jazz. Anything that it can handle, it will handle. But normally, yes, every machine should be, it should have a series of pre-installation configuration just to make sure that everything is working well. I'm going to refer you to the manual for that. By default, if your Windows server is up to date, you shouldn't have any issues and you can just go forward with the installation. You'll also notice that I've only picked the most basic of options during the installation. I didn't choose any of the extra agents or monitoring software. I just went with accepting the licenses and installing the LG. I'm not taking care of anything else. If you want to install that later down the road, you can do that. And this is not just a question of simplifying the video, it's also a question of simplifying your installation process. Let me explain. We find that the more options you add during your installation, the more things could potentially happen wrong, So to give you an idea, maybe there's a security issue on your servers. Maybe there's a problem with your machine and it won't accept one of the extra bits of configuration you're adding. So what we feel is simpler is to do the most vanilla of installations whenever we're doing installations anyway. We don't take care of SSL. We don't take care of certificates. We don't take care of network virtualizations. All of that you can always do later. If your installation goes bad, you have a lot less pieces to look at and see where your fail point was. So my personal suggestion, it's the way I like to work. I just go straight through the process and I don't add any bells or whistles unless I really need to. I do add some bells and whistles, but they don't tend to overcomplicate the installation. One of the bells and whistles that I do, like I said, is pre-configuring that service account on each machine, even the ones that don't really need it, such as the load generator. We're going to be doing that as soon as the configuration is completed here. Again, the service account on the load generator is not necessary, but if you go into another quote-unquote bell and whistle that you want to do, which is elastic cloud provisioning, I like to use the LG that I've already created as a base template for that future machine. So I create it right away, and it's something I keep doing all the time. I just like to do that right now. Saves me a lot of time and headache. That being said, I'm going to move the installation a little bit forward because it does take a couple of minutes. All right, so now, like I said, not installing any certificates. I'm not going to be doing any kind of SSL certificate, no nothing. I'm just going to go forward with the installation. We're going to click next, and then we'll be able to start creating that service account. Now, the service account from scratch is going to be called IUSR_Metro, all in capital letters. There's a default password that is already existing whenever you have the installation tool created, but we're going to create our own password right now because it saves us an extra step down the road, because obviously default passwords are not a good thing, especially, for security reasons. You can already imagine the implications of that. So to create an account, I go to computer management, and there I'll click on the user group, rather just the local users and groups. I'll create a new user. That new user, like I said, will be called IUSR_Metro, all in caps. I'm going to describe this as the LoadRunner Enterprise service account, or just service account. Probably would have been better if I wrote LoadRunner Enterprise service account, just for the sake of being easier to identify, but that's okay. I'm going to make sure that that password that I'm going to create, that I will not be able to change the password and it will not expire. But like I said, it's important that that account is properly configured, and for that, we want to add it to the administrator group. So we're going to do that now. And we are done with the load generator server. Now we can move on to the host server. We're going to do something a little bit similar. We're going to create our IUSR Metro account right away while we kind of warmed up for it. Same process. We're going to start off computer management. We're going to go to local users and groups. We're going to click on users, right click and create a new user. IUSR_Metro. And again, a service account, we're going to use the same password. It's going to be the same credentials going to be used for all these accounts on each different machine. Again, remember, it's not necessary to really do it on the load generator. So if you haven't done it, that's fine. But once you're on the host and once you're on the server itself, this machine and the next one, that needs to be done. And again, always make sure that this is added to the administrator group. So if you type the full name completely, you can do basically enter and we'll be fine. But I didn't do that here. So That's why you're seeing me having a couple of issues with entering the name. There we go. It's done. Now we can move on with the installation of the files. Again, make sure that when you run the setup tool, right-click, go as Run as Administrator. And this time we're going to use a different option. We're going to use the LoadRunner Enterprise Host option, the second one from the top left. Again, we have a couple of packages that need to be installed. These are all things that you could do in advance, by the way. If for some reason you don't have access to the software, but you want to get your machines ready, just go and grab the installation manual. You'll have all the prerequisites that you need to follow to make sure that the machine is ready. It's not really going to save you that much time, but at least it could potentially familiarize yourself with the installation process. Regardless, like I said, if your server is remotely up to date, a lot of the prerequisites will be taken care for you during the installation process. So now we're installing the LoadRunner Enterprise host. I'm going to click on Next here. All right, I accept the terms. I will not be installing any other service. Again, the default location I'm not really too worried about. And now the installation process will go forward, and it will take a couple of minutes. Same thing. It's not we're not installing a simple software here, right? It's going to take a couple of minutes before it's actually done. However, once we're done with the installation, there's going to be one bit of configuration that we'll want to do, and you'll want to have that information ready. If you're going to be using SSO tokens down the line, this is when you want to implement that security passphrase. So have that information ready if you're going to be doing it. We always do it right away. So that security passphrase will be inputted here. That will be the only thing you need to configure on the host itself. Okay, so once we click Next, this is when we'll enter our passphrase for the SSO token. I already have one that I've prepared, so I'm just going to paste it here. I'm going to click Next. There's going to be a little bit more fiddling being done by the installation service. And once that is done, we'll be able to move forward to the server installation process. The server is where we have a lot more work to do. So we are done with this. We are done with the load generator. We're done with the host. So we have our two machines that will be required to run LoadRunner Enterprise. Again, no SSL, no certificates here right now. Going forward with that, no network virtualization. We're closing that. And we're moving on to the next server. Now, the first thing we'll do when we're going to go on the next server is that we have to do a little bit more preparation for that machine. And one of the things that we'll need to do, obviously, we're going to be creating that IUSR Metro user. We're going to do that right away. But because we are already a little bit familiar with that process, I'm going to take that time to explain what we're going to be doing next. So we're going to go to server management after this, and we're going to go and add some roles to the machine, roles and packages rather. And one of those is going to be the ISS. Or rather, I think it's ISS. I'm drawing a blank, unfortunately. But the IIS service package, if I'm correct, is something that you'll need to have already installed on that machine before you can go forward with the installation. And as I do that, since we're already in that configuration or that process of adding stuff, I also like to take the time to add Telnet. And it's not necessary. Telnet is not necessary for the installation, but it's a practical tool for debugging down the road. So I always install it, no questions asked, especially when I'm trying to debug, ports and making sure that certain ports are open and so forth. So anyway, once the system is ready for us to start doing the extra installations, we'll click on Manage on the top right portion of the Server Manager dashboard. Add roles and features. We're going to click Next, 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 and then we'll go down to IIS, Web Server IIS. We'll add that, add features, then we'll click Next, and that's the other panel where we'll be able to scroll down and find Telnet. Again, Telnet, optional. I just like to do it. So we'll click on Next again, continue that, let it install. It may take a few moments here as well. I'm going to fast forward a little bit, time compress. And Okay, we're at 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Run as admin. And this time I'm going to take the top left tool, which is install LoadRunner Enterprise itself. That is the server software. That is where you're going to be going. You can see there's a lot more pre-requirements that are going to be installed this time. But a lot of these, again, can be handled by the system. It tells you need to have IIS configured and installed and so forth. We've already done that. Normally, I believe it wouldn't do it for you. You need to do it yourself for that part. It's not every part of the prerequisites can be automatically installed, at least not at the time we're recording this, by the installation software package. So we know what parts are and aren't easy to install. So for something like IIS, I did it already, but for everything else, I know it's not going to be a problem. It's going to take care of it for me. And we should be able to go forward with the rest of the installation. Now, once that installation is completed, and again, we'll have to say what we're installing. No, we don't want any extra services and so on. There's going to be a lot of configuration things that we need to input. We're only going to put in the minimum that we need to do so we can just go through with the installation, finish with the installation itself, to minimize the potentiality of having some extra bits that would have caused problems during the installation. So here, we're going to fast forward a little bit. So just up to here, we're still 30 minutes into an installation. We're not even done. So here, the IUSR Metro, I'm not using default credentials. I'm entering the user I want. It could be any other user. I just like to use IUSR Metro. I put in my password. I don't have to go back and reconfigure all of that, so I really like that. The next portion here, the root folder. I'm going to be doing a little bit of fiddling here, but I'm going to have some issues as I create my my folders here. But here, all I'm doing is creating a folder where the content files of the work are going to be stored. So you can create that anywhere you want. Could be on a network file if you will. I mean, it's up to you, but obviously it's going to be better, faster, more performant if you keep it on the same machine. So just pick a folder where you want that to be stored, create that folder even. Best practice, especially for older versions, keep that at the root of the C drive, because if your project names are super long and you're on an older version of LRE, it could cause problems. Eventually, it kind of bugs out. But by best practice, I just like to create something at the root of any drive, and I'll create that repo there. You can click on test connection to make sure that it's going to work, but in this case, we're going to be fine. It's not a problem. We're not connecting to something else. Here, you want to configure your database. Right now, here I'm using the system administrator password because I need a user ID for an admin account for the database. And I also want a user account with normal access. Obviously, that's a bit of an extreme account to use, the SA account. I wouldn't recommend that, but this is just a demo. I just wanted to show how to do the installation. So pick yourself an account, create one just to administer LoadRunner. I think that will actually help you determine who can do what. Make sure that that account has all the proper rights as per the manual, but that's something that you will want to give off to your database administrator. This is not something that, as the person who installs LoadRunner, you should be too concerned about, because usually you probably won't have access to the database in any way, shape, or form. But you'll want to have an administrator account for LoadRunner and a user account for LoadRunner, which is going to be used both for the creation of certain schemas and so forth, and for the adding and manipulation of the data that's going to be within those data tables. And once, obviously, you'll need to have the address of the database. In our case, on our server, it's 172.31.1.1. The default port by most standards is going to be 1433. That is also the default port that is currently prescribed by LoadRunner in the manual. And once you are done entering all that information, you absolutely need to test your connection. If your test connection fails, you won't be able to go forward. So you got to make sure that that works. Okay. Obviously, that was an MS SQL database at the top. It's really important that you pick that right option. Forgot to mention that. Now, the next page, if you manage to connect properly to your database, you will now have the opportunity to give a specific name to all the schemas that will be created on said database. You already have a couple of suggested names. I like to enter demo because I'll want to delete these later down the road. This is just a one-time installation. However, best practice, I like to name them at the end with the version of the installation that we're doing right now and a serial number representing the date. So for example, if I'm recording today on the 17th of January 2024, I'll enter 2024-0117 and probably underscore 2023 R1. That tells me when my database was created and for what. And most importantly, it's going to be key if later down the road I'm doing upgrades or whatever, or migrations, I'll have an idea of which databases are the newest just by looking at the name. But again, best practice, not necessary. That's going to be up to you. So we're going to continue here. Remember that SSO token passphrase? Well, I already have it saved in my background, but if you have any other security passphrases that you want to take care of, for example, whenever you're going to be doing all of this work, there's going to be some encryption happening. Same thing for your SSO token. So have your passphrases ready that you'll want to use. I suggest that you use a different password or a different passphrase rather for your encryption and for your SSO token. Obviously, security reasons oblige. You don't want to reuse always the same password. Finally, here, what we're doing is creating an account, an administrator account, to let you log in to LoadRunner from the beginning, especially in the LoadRunner administrator configuration board. Personally speaking, not necessary, but I wrote administrator and then a password, right? I like to just type admin. The reason is sometimes people mistype administrator. The more characters you have, the worse it can get, right? You can name that account whatever you want, really. But I like to usually just type admin because sometimes it causes problems, which I've seen before where someone tries to enter as administrator, didn't work a couple of times only to realize, oh, they mistyped administrator. The thing is, when you're doing the initial installation of this tool, it can be a kind of a daunting experience, you could say. And sometimes when people are a bit nervous to make sure everything works, any kind of error that you can avoid is going to alleviate stress a lot, right? So like I said, foregoing SSL configuration, we're also going to be foregoing mail server configuration. All of that, we're going to go past it. And now we're going to see a summary of everything that we've entered. We could go back and edit just in case. And now we click next and we start the installation process. That's going to take a little bit of time. You can imagine that it's going to be talking to the database, creating schemas, creating stuff creating the repo, creating the files, creating all kinds of configuration files and so forth. We are technically done with just installing the software, okay? Again, there's some extra options at the end. We're not installing network virtualization. At this point, I want to test and see if everything went up to plan. So I'm going to open a browser window, and I could either type localhost /LRE. I could also enter just the IP, and it would do the same thing, right? I mean, for that, just the IP address IP address /LRE, it will bring me to the same splash page, and I want to go on the right side to the administrator console. I'm going to type in the information for the administrator account that I've created during the installation process. And now what I'm going to do is I'll add the host and the load generator. Why? Because first thing I like to do whenever I check an installation is to go to the system health check, and it can check and for that you need, well, preferably, you want to add everything here, right? You want to add your host, your load generator. You want to make sure that everything can talk to each other. You could do a limited health check without taking care of those things. But because we've already prepared everything ahead of time, it's going to be simpler for us to do it now versus just installing, do a minimal health check, go outside, go to your servers, start the installation, go back to this, add the machines, then do another health check. Seems a little bit convoluted for me. So installing a host is pretty simple. In the host name, you've already seen it, but in the host name, you enter the IP, you enter a description however you like. This is a controller that I also want to be a data processor. I've added it to the general pool. So here I enter its IP, I enter a description. I will pick load generator, and this time the host installation will take the type is 1LG. Add it to the general pool, click on save. This usually takes a little bit less time, so we shouldn't be too bothered with that. An extra step I like to do just out of safety. It's probably not necessary anymore. This really dates back from the old versions of LRE, but I'll select all the host machines that I've added, host, load generators, whatever, and do a reconfigure. Okay, so now in the maintenance, I clicked on System Health Check really quickly because I'm kind of used to doing it. And I've selected everything. I'm doing a complete health check. Now this will test the configuration, the base installation, the communication between the hosts, and all that jazz. Is going to take care of everything. And obviously, I consider an installation to be successful if everything goes into green. If everything's in the green here, it's a really good sign that things are going to be working. So there are 3 sections that the system will check. First one is integrity, followed by LoadRunner Enterprise servers, and finally the hosts. The first portion has 3 things to check. The second one has 15 things to check, but it's actually fairly quick. And as you can see, it's already completed pass. If you look at the right-hand portion of your screen, you can see that everything is passed now. We're going to do a quick observation. The last portion usually checks for 5 things. Everything is in the green. If there was a problem, that portion would be red or in warning, and you would have an idea of what you probably need to look at. Again, because I didn't do a full installation with SSL and certificates and all that jazz, I alleviated myself from extra potential problems during the installation, but this gives you an idea of what a vanilla install, quote unquote, is. You can follow these instructions to create more load generators, to create more hosts, which you'll likely need if you're in an enterprise environment. You'll be adding them pretty much the same way. But there you go. Perfect install, one shot. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment, add questions, send us some questions via email. We'll gladly help you out. If you wish help to or assistance to install all of these with SSO, with more encryption, with all the configurations for your firewalls and all that jazz, if you need any extra assistance, you know where to call. We'll be there to help you out with your installation needs. And that will be it for today. Thank you very much.